Hello everyone, welcome back to the podcast. I'm Adrian Lloyd, this is just my stupid opinion. For those who checked it out, I hope you enjoyed my conversation I had with Professor Meta. I know I've said it a few times, but I want to reiterate again that I had a fantastic time talking to him. He's a very smart man. I want to apologize that at the beginning and the end, the audio wasn't the best. This was because I wasn't using, this microphone was hooked up to Skype for the interview. So I was also having another microphone, a personal one, attached to me, and that's the one I was talking through, and it kind of got a little, well, for those who checked it out, you heard it wasn't the best audio quality. So I want to apologize about that. But yeah, no, I'm very, very interested from those who checked out the interview. I'm looking to see where I need to improve on my interview skills. So for those who checked it out, please let me know where you think I did well and where you think I need to improve in my interview skills. Just so that way, if next interview I do, when I go into it, I can be more what you're looking for. Yeah, it was after that happened. It's kind of funny, actually. I guess me and Professor Meta, we bonded a little bit, if you want to even say that, in our fight on Twitter, because as this came out and I put out on my Twitter and he put out on his Twitter that the episode came out, we had a couple people that started coming after coming after him, and I kind of, he was a guest on my podcast, and this is why the heat was coming from, so I kind of jumped in on that one. But it's good, I think that the fact that some people didn't even have to watch that and was willing to criticize us, I think that shows that we're doing something right. Because he even said during the interview that he sees every criticism as a badge of honor. And I kind of understood what he meant by that one. I haven't received too much criticism since I started up, but it does feel a little bit like a badge of honor when people come at you. One of these guys, even in his profile pic on Twitter, who was coming after us, was wearing an Antifa hat. So I didn't even mention it during our argument, but I thought it was a little funny. This guy is trying to make some comments, trying to call out Professor Meta for his credentials and whether he's an academic or not. This guy has an Antifa hat on and probably reads the Antifa material, the intersectionality science, probably the postmodernism science. Probably the reason you may have been so pissed is because that was exactly the type of people that we were talking about during our discussion. In fact, I found that when these couple people came at us, it kind of showed that we kind of made our point. What we had been talking about just a day or two before was proven right by these people. Alrighty, so we're going to get into a few different stories today. And I think we should start with the big one that's going on with America with the government shutdown. The big story that has happened in Canada over the last week has been the hijab hoax story. The reason I'm not really going to get into it right now, I may briefly go over it, is because I'm actually preparing a shorter video where I'm going to go more in depth about it. Even though we've already proven that it's been a hoax, even though the Toronto police proved that it wasn't a hoax, there's still some extra questions that need to be answered, and these are the sort of things that I'm going to be addressing in this video. So I want to start off talking about the government shutdown, because Friday the U.S. Senate had to come to an agreement on how to finance the government. It was a bill that was going through, a stopgap bill. It's essentially a short-term funding bill. And this was going to fund agencies such as the military being one, and several different agencies. And the U.S. Senate could not come to an agreement, and this led to a full government shutdown. There was a partial one on Friday until the House of Representatives reached a decision, and it was pretty much done on party lines. The Republicans voted in favor of this, but because they had the majority in the House, they had enough votes in order to get this through the Senate. Democrats were against. The situation in the Senate was a little bit different, and this is what led to the shutdown, is the fact that for this type of bill, they needed what was called a supermajority. And even though the Republicans have a majority in the Senate as well as the House of Representatives, the supermajority requires 60 votes, and the Republicans only have, I believe, 51 people right now sitting in the Senate. So they were going to have to win over some Democrats. The Democrats have 47 seats, and 2 independents are sitting. So once again, the vote fell along party lines, and we found ourselves in a deadlock. The Republicans couldn't get the supermajority that they were looking for, and because of this, government shut down. Now, what led to this situation? Because there's a lot of bitching and blaming back and forth as to who's responsible for this government shutdown. I don't feel that you can blame one side or the other completely. Both sides have to take responsibility in this, but we'll get into it and we'll see how both sides are at least hold their blame. So what was going on is this bill was going to be a temporary funding for the government, as I explained already. So this bill, if it had been passed on Friday, would have meant the government agencies would have been funded until about mid-February, so a few weeks of funding, and then they would have to do this all over again. The reason that the Democrats didn't want to vote for this and didn't want this funding bill to go in is because the funding had nothing to do with DACA, which is the program that is protecting about 700 to 800,000 illegal minors that entered the United States. They were minors, at least, when they entered the United States. Their parents brought them there. So we all have heard a lot about that. Trump's trying to end that. Democrats are trying to keep it alive. So this was one way that they were trying to keep it alive. They wanted it put into the federal funding. Now, on the problem with this, too, what ended up happening when the Democrats refused to work with the Republicans and sign this bill, this meant that there's probably not going to be an agreement in time for what is known as the CHIP program, which is the child health insurance program, CHIP. This is scheduled to run out by January 31st. The significance of this is it's a healthcare plan that protects that about 8 million U.S. children are on. So a lot of parents rely on this CHIP program, which began in the 1990s, and it was actually the product of the Democrats. It was supported by both Hillary and Bill Clinton, and it was expanded by Obama in 2011, and now now it covers about 8 million children, roughly, give or take. Without this government funding, which means that there would be renewed funds for the CHIP program, it means there's not going to be the coverage for these children. The problem is because it's predicted that the funding for the CHIP program right now is in a crisis because there's not enough to go around. So some states already have used up their funding. Other ones are probably going to use up their CHIP funding by the end of February. So there's not the money that they need in order to fund this program. This is why they need the financial bill passed, because this would have put the funding back into the CHIP program and given these people the coverage that they needed. But right now, it would have essentially renewed the CHIP program. Right now, though, as it's looking, it's scheduled to end on January 31st, and it doesn't look like there's going to be any agreement before then. So all these children that are on this program are going to find themselves without any coverage. So that's where we are. This is the two positions. And even though CHIP was never super popular with the Republicans, it's at least been, Trump has continued it under him. So what ended up happening is why this is a temporary bill being signed in is because Everything that happened with the CHIP program, it had actually ended back in it ended in September of 2017. So since then, Trump has just been signing temporary funding measures in order to keep the program alive. So that's why there's still money being flown. That's why there's money flowing into the program right now. And this is why without the funding bill, the program is pretty much going to cease. So essentially, both sides are accusing the other of hiding behind victims, essentially, and pushing for their absolute agenda. On the Democratic side, they're saying that they are throwing millions of American children under the bus in favor of these illegal immigrants. On the other side, the Democrats are accusing the Republicans of hiding behind these American children and using them as pawns, essentially, and saying that they won't give them the funding necessary. This is not entirely true, but where the blame does come is the fact that the Republicans have not till now put in measure a more permanent funding for it. And Trump apparently wants a more permanent funding, a long-term funding for the CHIP program. But so far, everything's just getting signed into these temporary bills. So the problem for the Republicans is that they have not really taken at least funding this program too seriously, or because they have had months in order to pass a more permanent long-term funding plan, but that has not happened. On the other side, the problem that the Democrats have is that, before we go back to the Democrats, the other thing is the fact that the Republicans have a majority in the House of Representatives, have a majority in the Senate, and own the White House. This is why everybody's accusing this being a Republican problem, because this is the first time a government shutdown has happened when all three levels of government are dominated by one political party. In the past, such as the 2013 shutdown, Obama I believe he owned the House of Representatives, but the Senate was Republican at the time, so that would have been the difference. Right now, the Republicans own all three. But on the other side, the problem is that the Democrats refuse to side with this bill unless there was something about DACA in it. Why this was a bad move now was the fact that DACA is still not scheduled to expire until March. So they have till March 2018, which means that this was not the final fight for DACA. Because this was only a temporary bill, which would have gone over till mid-February, that would have been another time they could have fought for it. And if that was another temporary bill, just extending it a few extra weeks, they would have had another fight where they could have fought for DACA. But the CHIP program, they needed that funding. That day needed to be funded. So the fact that the Democrats refused to side with the Republicans meant that millions of these children lost their insurance because of it. Now, sure, maybe the Republicans use them as pawns, but everybody is used as pawns when it comes to politics. What do you think the Democrats are doing with the DACA recipients? They're using them as pawns, political pawns. And as much as people might not like it, that is the nature of politics. Politics makes decisions every day that affect our lives. So for people to just say that, well, they're being used as pawns, it's like, yeah, what the fuck did you expect in the political system? It's cutthroat. But why I think the Democrats actually do hold more of blame over this is the fact that this was not the final fight for DACA. If they were so passionate about it but still wanted to make sure that those children were funded, they could have kept the fight up or at least moved it to next month. But they didn't do that, and the program is no longer funded. This also doesn't look good because Democrats are really trying for the 2018 midterm elections to win back some of what they've lost to the Republicans, some of what they lost to Trump. And the fact that they're not siding with the Republicans, which has led to a shutdown and affecting so many people, because as we said, like, government agencies aren't going to receive the funding they need. They're not going to get paid. A lot of people have been talking about how this is going to affect the military. So in the end, the Democrats have allowed millions of children to not be covered by their health care in favor for these illegal immigrants. The Republicans should have found a more permanent solution for this CHIP program a long time ago, months ago. As soon as it ran out, and if it was really that important to them, which they're acting like it is, which again, political move more than anything else. But while they're acting this way, they haven't done anything to ensure that the CHIP program would be funded long term. So here we are, government shutdown, and with neither side could come to a decision. What I didn't like, though, was some of the things that were thrown around. For instance, one thing that kind of pissed me off that I saw from Bernie Sanders was that he was throwing the argument around that the fact that the Republicans owned all three houses of government, that this meant that it was the Republicans' fault. However, if we go back and we check, because it's reported as to which senator voted which way, Bernie Sanders voted no for this bill. So Bernie Sanders voted against continuing, against preventing the government shutdown, and then he turns around and he's saying this is all the Republicans' fault. No. If more Democrats had been willing to work with the Republicans, then this would have gotten passed. Now, there were a few, because there were a few Republicans that didn't vote. A few Republicans that voted against it, and a few Democrats that voted against it. But all in all, it was along party lines. The CHIP program is more important for a few reasons. The first off is it's not just a universal sort of anybody can get on in healthcare. It's one that covers children. It's very specific. It is a children's health insurance plan. So there were more children that required this sort of coverage too, because like we said, we have about 8 million children that are covered under this. They don't receive their funding anymore. It's more important because, again, we're dealing with children. On top of that, on the other hand, as much as you hate to, as some people hate to say it, but we're comparing citizens to illegal immigrants, even if they were brought in as minors. Now, I actually would like to see some more negotiation on the DACA. I don't think just because people have been, I don't think that sort of the sins of the father necessarily have to affect the child. So if they were brought into the country while they were young, and that's all they've known, they're a good American citizen, haven't caused any problems, then I see no reason why you can't keep them there. If they're law-abiding citizens, sorry, I just realized what I said. If they're law-abiding and they're willing to adapt to American culture, they love American culture, and willing to take the proper steps towards citizenship, then I don't see why they shouldn't be in here. At that same time, a lot of these children that came in, that were brought in by their parents, they probably also, if their parents are sneaking across the border, while plenty of times it seems to be two situations, while plenty of times it is maybe family just looking for a better life, it can a lot of times be more criminals or someone sneaking in. So they may not have had the best upbringing, which means they're not the best fit for the society. Then we can look at more deporting these individuals. But I would like to see more amnesty for the DACA recipients who are law-abiding, who have done well and adapted to American culture. Those are the ones I would like to see some amnesty. Now, that being said, the reason why we do need to be tough on illegal immigration is because immigration, like anything else, is a law. Now, when you just want to allow anybody who's an illegal citizen, an illegal resident, illegal alien, there we go. If anybody who is an illegal alien comes in and you're just willing to offer blanket amnesty, well, first off, you don't know who all these people are, so a lot of them might not be the best fit for society. But you're also sort of saying, fuck the law. Fuck this law. You know what? It's a stupid law. Why should we follow this law? Why should we follow any law then? If any law that we think is stupid, why follow it then? That's the point of immigration laws. It's like anything else. Like any other law, it has to be enforced because otherwise our other laws are just as meaningless. So when we're willing to forego this, then we're willing to forego other laws. This is why I actually think you need to have strong immigration laws. Because this is where people want to go the most lax on the laws. Just don't worry about it. Just let people through. No big deal. It is a big deal because, once again, laws, you cannot pick and choose them. Another reason it's important to have strong immigration laws is because it shows how much your country is worth, essentially. If you are willing to have a strong citizenship test, a strong whole citizenship program that forces people to commit in order to become citizens, well then people aren't just going to come over here for no reason then. They will actually come over here and try and become citizens because that's what they want. They want to be active Canadian citizens. So when we make it tougher, those people that really want that really believe in what we believe in, they're the ones that are going to struggle through that program and come out on the other side as Canadian citizens. And I think those are the people we want to have in our society. But when you're just going to make it lax, the laws lax, and you're just going to say, hey, you know what, whatever, just anybody can cross, then quite simply, you really aren't getting people that come in that respect your culture, that respect your being a citizen of your country. In fact, we kind of see that already in our society now. A good instance of this are, for instance, when people say, Muslims say that they feel that in other people's countries, they should be able to follow a Sharia law, that Sharia law should trump the local law. Well, this shows no respect for our culture if they think that their religious laws should trump our local laws. So this is one example of this. Or people that come into our culture and into our countries and believe that they can do whatever they did from their home cultures. No, you can't. For instance, you cannot come in and marry off your 13-year-old daughter to a grown-ass man. You just can't do it. But if you don't actually set the standard, a lot of people that do have that culture, that do still believe in, say, child marriages, they're still going to come to Canada and do it. And then a lot of times they piss and moan when they do get caught, which doesn't happen all that often, but when they do get caught, they piss and moan about how dare we arrest them, how dare we do something like that. Well, in our point of view, you just committed a form of pedophilia. You married off your daughter to a grown-ass man. What do you think he's going to be doing? He's going to be fucking his new wife. And she's 13. In our culture, that's pedophilia, and that's unacceptable. So while I'd like to see some amnesty for those DACA recipients that have actually really taken on that American culture, and I'm sure there are plenty, there's plenty more that have not, and are not a good fit for that society. And part of that reason is because immigration laws were not enforced. Now, my human side, of course, wants to help every single human it can. I really would. Realistically, we cannot. And realistically, we cannot allow just everybody into our countries. While we may be seen more as a multicultural society, I still find that even in a multicultural society, there's a standard. It doesn't mean you can just do whatever you want. In a multicultural society, you're supposed to bring the good aspects of your culture with you, and you're supposed to integrate that into our society. But now, with the multicultural society that we have, the fact that it was never enforced, it was just multiculturalism, we want to mix everybody in together without setting any standards. We find ourselves where now, not only do we find that people have very little in common with each other, but also on top of that, people are bringing the bad aspects of their culture in. I mean, across Europe, since the immigration crisis, for instance, we saw a huge spike in, for instance, female genital mutilation. That's not bringing the good parts of your culture in. But that's also what happens when you just open the doors and say, everybody, come on in. Realistically, we would like to help everybody, but we can't. And the fact that the Democrats want complete amnesty either shows some form of stupidity or blissful ignorance, because they should see these problems. However, the more you look at it, the more it really does look like Democrats do import immigrants looking for votes. Because as we look at the demographics, they really do not do very well with the white population in comparison to the Republicans. While in contrast, a lot of the immigrants that show up in America do vote Democrat, do vote left wing. So it's really hard not to look at it like that's what they're going for. They're just going for votes. But that's what they're doing. Right now in Canada, we're having a controversy that should not even be taking place it shouldn't even be taking place to begin with. And what's going on up here is that our Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, announced that in terms of the Canada Summer Job Program, pro-life groups will not receive government funding because it's essentially being pro-life is an affront to women's rights. So this shouldn't even be happening to begin with for a few different reasons. I'm not even religious, and I can see how this infringes on freedom of religion. It's the religious folks that are pro-life. Well, of course, not just religious folks, but when you think of pro-life, you think of religious folks. So we could see how that was going to be a problem, especially for what the Bible has said about ending pregnancies. So that was going to be a problem. I don't know why Trudeau thought this was a good idea, because this is also showing very authoritarian tactics on controlling on what people think and what people do. Because Trudeau is pro-choice, and I don't think he wants any restrictions on abortion, which is a little bit scary. But he's actually suggesting that just being pro-life, not actively campaigning for it, not going out to abortion clinics and protesting them, but just being pro-life means that you cannot receive government funding. I think everybody should be against this, regardless of where you fall on the political field. Even if you are pro-choice, I mean, I'm actually pro-choice. 7 weeks pro-choice is my mark, because 7 weeks is when from what I've found, is when the heart starts beating. And that's how we judge life now. When we put someone in the hospital, we hook them up to a heart rate monitor. And when the heart rate monitor flatlines, that's when we say that they are dead. So that's why I use the 7 week pro-choice. Until the heart beats, then I don't consider it a life. But that doesn't mean that anybody who doesn't agree with me and says that you shouldn't have an abortion ever, that doesn't mean that they should be treated well in such a manner. Like, this is not only just saying, well, you can't get funding, but it's extremely disrespectful to people's personal beliefs. Like, that's just a giant fuck you from the government. This is also just another way that Trudeau is trying to throw his weight around and control what people say and what people do. This is something I'm against because this is a use of government force. And it's honestly a little bit unnerving that he'd be willing to do something like this. And the thing is he's sitting strong. It's not like he's like there's been some pressure and he's saying, okay, that was a bad choice, we'll roll that back. No, the Liberal government is staying strong on this, and they're saying that it is because it is against women's rights. Well, it's not a complete 50-50 split in half. When it comes to women, it's almost a 50-50 split when it comes to pro-life and pro-choice. I think at most, maybe it's a 60-40, 60% pro-choice and about 40% pro-life, roughly. At most, that's the numbers that I've seen in the past. So the fact that such a high percentage of women are pro-life, that kind of shows that it's not against women's rights, because women's rights are universally would be good, amongst women. And those women were perfectly capable of coming to their own conclusions. And they've concluded that they believe abortion is wrong, abortion is bad. Fine, we disagree. But now you're actually going to suggest that those, say, 40 to maybe 49% of women don't adhere to women's rights? That is actually against women's rights. Because the whole point of women's rights when it began was actually choice. That women wanted to be able to decide their own fate, be able to decide for themselves what they did, control their own bodies. This is going back decades, we're talking back in the early 1900s, and then the second wave feminists that came in just after World War II. This is the sort of thing they were fighting for. They were fighting for choice. But now we're suggesting that women who have made up their own mind and don't agree are against women's rights. To me, this logically doesn't make sense. It's not a sound argument at all. The reason why it pisses me off is because I think about it from the other side. I try and do that a lot. I try and see things from both sides as much as possible. And even though I'm not pro-life, I'm pro-choice, I still think that if I was on the other side and the government was telling me that essentially I'm a terrible person, I'm against women's rights, and trying to change my mind by saying I will not receive government funding for my program just because of that reason, then yeah, I'm going to feel personally attacked. So this is why I look at it from one side and I see what the government will do, and I say, I don't want that to happen to me. So we might as well stop that before it begins. While abortion, the issue in and of itself, is a controversial issue, and we can go back to having that bitch fight once we're done, let's at least establish that the government does not get to decide that for anybody. Every single person, both genders, man and women, yes, the only two genders, both men and women can decide for themselves whether they are pro-life or pro-choice. So thank you, Canadian government. Thank you, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. But as the Liberals used to say to the Christian conservatives before them, stay the fuck out of my bedroom. Stay the fuck out of my body. That used to be what the Liberals said to the Christian conservatives. It's the complete opposite now. now the Christian conservatives can say that to the liberals. What a fucking world. And while we're talking about women's rights, the last couple days has been the Women's March that has been going on all across North America, second annual Women's March. And oh yes, everybody broke out their pussy hats for this one. The pussy hats were everywhere. The pussy hats made everything pink. I swear to God, aliens are going to show up, just see the reflection of the light of all the pussy hats. That's all they're going to be able to see. And of course, last year, the Women's March got started because it was pretty much in protest of Donald Trump getting elected to office, and it took place on his inauguration day, the 20th of January. So this is the second annual one. Women are took to the streets and were fighting for equality. And as we take a look, we can see various people and signs. Oh, I love this one. Bearded dude wearing a pussy hat. Oh yeah, with a "this is what a feminist looks like" shirt. At least that's what I assume he's wearing. Then the other one that I ended up seeing were these two fucking, I don't even know how old girls, what are you, 9 years old, saying, "Watch out, Trump, my generation votes next." And if that's their threat, that's actually a pretty fucking bad threat, considering the generation she's talking about, Generation Z, is actually growing up to be the most conservative generation we've had in a while. That's what happened when the pendulum swings all one way. This is actually kind of funny because it's reminiscent to what happened back in like something around the 40s, 50s, 60s during that time revolution. It was all of the children that got into a culture war and a political war with their parents' generation. Essentially, it was the Republicans versus the Democrats at that time. But now they're saying, watch out, my generation's coming. The most conservative one, the one that's probably going to keep Trump in the White House. Cool. Probably not, actually, because he only can serve 2 terms. He only got a couple years left until re-election, so I guess 3. But anyway, why would you bring your daughters out to a place where there's just pussy hats everywhere? I know you're trying to say that it's like, well, we're trying to show them empowerment. You can show them empowerment without taking them out to be part of the mob. And then finally, one thing that I could not believe was this one. This ridiculous person right here with this that says, "When they go low, we go high," which is a Michelle, of course, as you can see in the middle, it's a Michelle Obama quote. But they're coming this with Joe Biden's face. You mean creepy Uncle Joe Biden? Creepy used to touch all the girls and the wives in a weird way, Joe Biden? Sure, we had a lot of good memes that came out from him and Barack Obama, but Jesus Christ, this is who you're going to fucking support? This is who you're going to show as the face of feminism?
We just want to play these clips and want to warn you that what you're about to see is very disturbing. Now, obviously, the behavior that you're seeing here fits the profile of a pedophile. Obviously, nobody out there would take liberties with other people's children like creepy Joe Biden does. And there's just tons of footage of him out there touching children inappropriately, caressing them, massaging them, basically grooming them. He out there regarding this creepy Biden. Now look how he kind of like, he's like, "Come here, kid, come here," and he grabs her, yanks her, and then he starts touching her. I mean, this is very inappropriate and disturbing behavior, but it's very classic. It's what it's expected when it comes to these kind of people. Look at him, whispering sweet nothings, and this is kind of like his MO. He's basically grooming the children, trying to make them feel comfortable, making them feel special, that kind of thing. I mean, this is what predators do. We're seeing it again here, and it's very inappropriate. He grabs him by the arm, he yanks him real close, and he's like, "Come here, kid."
So this is really the hill that modern day feminism is going to die on, eh? This is disappointing. And a little funny. But these days, feminists are supporting all the wrong people and they're condemning all the wrong people. Good feminists, real feminists, ones that fight for real women's rights and actually just want true equality, that aren't looking to turn the spin the pendulum back the other way, to swing the pendulum back the other way. These days, these are the ones that are being labeled as the bad feminists, the fake feminists, the traitorous feminists. And then all the bad ones are the ones that everyone's looking up to. People look up to people like Linda fucking Sarsour. And they walk around and say, we need equal pay, shatter the glass ceiling, this, that, and the other. And literally one from the entire protest all across the country, one fucking woman actually made some reference to the Iran protests. One woman out of all of them reenacted the scene of the girl waving the hijab there and said that she was standing for her Iranian sisters. One. There's where real feminists should be focusing their attention. There's where the real feminists are focusing their attention. They are paying attention to this. And all the fake ones are just focusing on bullshit issues that have been debunked 1,000 times over. They say that you got a rape culture on campus. No, actually, when it comes to getting sexually assaulted and raped, turns out campuses these days, especially in the States, are not only some of the safest places where you can avoid getting sexually assaulted and raped, but also are actually some of the most draconian to guys in terms of rape and sexual assaults. So you focus on that, and you focus on the gender pay gap, which has been debunked 1,000 times over as showing it has more, the most significant differences in the pay gap have to do with personal choices. Even if there is a slight gender pay gap, there's practically nothing there once you take away personal choices. So you focus on this and you forget all of those real feminists in Iran that are fighting for their own liberation right now. The real feminists that either take off their hijabs and get arrested, the real feminists that either walked around with white hijabs to show a public protest against the hijab, and real feminists who end up get arrested and eventually killed by government forces in fighting for their freedom. But you know what? Next to nothing is mentioned. Next to nothing in this Woman March is mentioned. This is the hill that modern day feminism is going to die on. So Canada and America are prepared for the 6th round of NAFTA talks. That's right, the 6th. And this one is, I think it's going to be drama-filled, because it's going to be a 10-day marathon, and the Americans are pissed. The Americans have not been happy with the Canadians, with us Canadians, for our contributions, essentially. So what's ended up happening recently is I've bitched for some time in the past about Trudeau's progressive agenda when he's trying to make trade deals. This has fallen through when we try to make trade deals, when we were trying to do the TPP again. This is what caused a lot of friction with our other trade partners. This has caused problems in NAFTA already. And also, this is pretty much one of the things that fell through a trade deal with China, although I'm beginning to suspect in terms of that one that this has more to do with Chinese influence over Trudeau, but that's been covered in one of my videos, The Shady Truth, about the shady history of the Trudeau Foundation. And there's more to it than just that, and I'll get into that one day, but just no time right now. We got to talk a little bit more about this. So progressive trade agenda, that's one thing. So along this has to do with environment, has to do with labor, it has to do with certain gender parity in the workplace and race parity in the workplace. Pretty much a progressive agenda. So there's that, and then on top of that, Canada has also complained to the World Trade Organization about U.S. trade practices, and this has happened, I believe, during NAFTA talks. So of course the Americans are not going to like that, and they're coming in essentially saying that they've had enough of Canada's shit, and that we need to have a fucking deal. So if we do not come to some agreement on NAFTA at the end of this 10-day marathon, I don't believe there will be a 7th. I believe we're going into the final inning. We're up to bat, and we need to hit a home run. And Trudeau's government is not the people to do it. The thing is they, for some reason, seem to feel that they're dealing with a government that's more like their own. Like they're dealing with Obama-era Democrats or something like that. Because this progressive agenda is not going well. I guess I've already stated that. It's not going well. And clearly because we're dealing with businessmen Republicans, and they want to get to a deal that is going to be the best for them, and doing on a progressive trade agreement is not going to be best for them. Canada is still trying to push this, despite the fact that this is just a cyanide pill. This is just going to kill NAFTA, because let's not forget, Trump doesn't fucking like NAFTA. He said it was one of the worst trade agreements that's ever been struck between, ever, in the history of trade agreements. He said it's one of the worst. So he really doesn't care if NAFTA goes through. In fact, part of the renegotiation in NAFTA, it's not going to really be a free trade negotiation anymore. It's going to have a lot of regularities. It's going to have a lot of gratuities on top. Gratuities? Sorry, duties, I guess is what I meant to say. There's going to be a lot of duties on top, a lot of taxes on top now. So we're not really dealing with a free trade agreement anymore. We're dealing with a protectionist trade agreement now. So we're completely not even looking in the same direction on this trade, yet Trudeau keeps trying to push forward the exact same thing, the exact same agenda. But even when they're dealing with the Americans, they're like freaking kids in a playground, because they're saying things like, oh, they're bully, and he gets under their skin, and she's mean. This is all the Liberals can do these days. All they can do is whine and whine about how mean somebody is. The Liberal Party of Canada is a weak fucking party. Do you remember back when Trump first got elected, and then Trudeau made his first trip down to the U.S. in order to see the new president, and this happened?
His other technique, the reassuring top tap. We saw it in action during that 19-second handshake with Japan's Shinzo Abe. How did Trudeau do in his first round? No yanks, no taps. Trudeau almost leads with his own move. We'll call it the deltoid brace.
So Trudeau, who apparently has seen a few clips of Trump shaking hands before, knows that's how he likes to throw them off. He ends up just bracing himself when he shakes Trump's hand, and then people believe that this meant that Trudeau was good to handle Trump. It's like, oh yeah, he'll be fine now. Oh, do you see that handshake? Oh yeah. No, he can take care of Trump. He'll be fine. It just brings me back to an interview when he was running. I believe he's just about to jump in for the Conservative Party leadership when Kevin O'Leary is running, and what he said about Justin Trudeau.
We're going to need a really strong leader to deal with Trump. He's being very protective about jobs and the U.S. economy. And we've gone completely the other direction. We've made our economy very uncompetitive. We've raised taxes, layered on more regulations, made it very hard to start small businesses. We're going in the wrong direction. And on top of that, Trudeau is a weak leader. He's going to get slaughtered in negotiations with Trump. I'd rather have somebody else there, frankly, because I think it's going to end badly. It really is Godzilla versus Bambi.
Kevin O'Leary was right. In that regard, when he was talking about Trump and Trudeau and trade, he was absolutely 100% right. Trudeau can't handle this. Trudeau is too fucking weak to handle this. And whether you like him or not, Trump is a much stronger authoritarian figure. So who was really going to come out on top of this? If Trudeau was actually not going to see eye to eye with Trump and was going to butt heads with Trump, as we're doing with NAFTA, then really all that, then Trudeau stands no chance against Trump. If they're seeing eye to eye and going along the same path, then they'll be fine. But Trudeau is a weak leader. He has been for some time. He's weak on the world stage. We've seen him when he shows up to other conferences and he looks like a lost puppy dog. And this is the guy that we're hoping will actually strike up a trade agreement with the United States. Almost every other trade agreement that Trudeau has pushed, any big one, has fallen through because they don't like Canada's stance. I'm starting to think that Trudeau might actually be insane for the sole fact of the old saying where it says insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. His progressive trade agenda has killed trade for Canada. And those that do want to get involved in trade, for instance, even though we had another trade agreement fall through with China, despite that, he is at least finding enough buyers to buy off Canadian businesses and putting them in the hands of foreign investors. So how are we as Canadians supposed to actually expect him to make a trade agreement that would benefit us? And how are we supposed to expect him to be able to negotiate with Trump when Trump is so much different? Trump does what he wants. He goes his own way. He doesn't give a fuck whether the rest of the world is following him or not. He's going to lead America down the path he wants and fuck anybody else that tells him otherwise. He's already proven that. He's given the middle finger to allies that that are telling him not to do shit, and he's given the middle finger to the UN. So I'm not really sure why Trudeau would think that he could handle Trump. His weak ass fucking progressive agenda has failed Canadians time and time again, and is going to continue to fail Canadians time and time again. In fact, Rona Ambrose came out of the woods recently, and she ended up saying that in terms of NAFTA, it was only a matter of when. It's not whether NAFTA would fall apart, it's that it will fall apart, and it's just how much longer do we really have with the NAFTA agreement. Oh boy. The next prime minister that comes in office is going to have a bitch of a time cleaning up all the trade agreements that Trudeau either made or the amount of trade agreements that fell through and people who've just lost faith in Canadian businesses and Canadian negotiation strategies. It's just we've lost a lot of faith in the world because of Trudeau. It's really embarrassing. So many Americans, like the more progressive liberal types down in the States, are saying how they would love to have Trudeau here. They would love to have Trudeau as their president. But they haven't really looked past his smiling face, and they haven't looked at anything he's done. He really is Clinton if Clinton had gotten elected. So the other interesting story that we've been hearing about recently, actually, is there's not much to go on yet. And if it's true, it's pretty damning. And that's the FISA memo. That's the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act. And as it's probably a lot of people know this, it's been going around on Twitter. It's been smashing the internet, this whole release the memo, what's going around. And from what we are hearing, there is a memo that has been put together that details both the DNC, the FBI, and several other government agencies, including the Obama and some of his officials, that work together to try and stop Donald Trump from getting elected. This was sort of, as people were saying, some people on Twitter were saying, they're saying it was a never Trump, always Hillary. If this is true, this is pretty damning. And a lot of people, a lot of Republicans and even some Democrats have said that they've read this memo, that it's really damaging, and that it needs to be released to the public. Yet it seems like it won't, and with this government shutdown that happens, it most certainly will not. So some have begun to theorize whether this shutdown had more to do then than just DACA when it came to the Democrats. Some are wondering whether this shutdown, the reason the Democrats really weren't willing to form a deal, while DACA was the cover, is in fact that they're hoping that to shut down the government, wait for this FISA memo to blow over, and hopes that it gets forgotten in the dust, essentially. I don't know if that part is true, but this memo does seem to exist. It's not just it doesn't seem to be just some people saying there's a memo that exists and, this is what's saying blah, 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 blah. But we're hearing from actual senators and Congress members and people in government. We're hearing them say that they've read this memo and that it needs to be released. I think it should be released. And really, if the Democrats and Obama have nothing to hide, then release it. If that FISA memo really is nothing and it's just a bunch of bullshit, then release it, let people look through it, because you will have people that'll try and debunk it without a doubt. So release it. Let them release it. But if it turns out that it actually does have something damaging on it, then the Democrats absolutely will go to every length to avoid it getting released, especially considering that Obama was kind of their golden pony, if you will. Everybody in the Democrats loved Obama. Obama has become their new Kennedy for them, essentially. From what I can tell, from the way that people still talk about Obama, he's their new Kennedy. Their new superstar, their new superstar Democratic president that should be the image for others to live up to. This is kind of the way I found that Democrats have held up Obama since he's left office. Holy shit. This would smash open a lot of the imagery that Obama put around himself. Certain things he didn't pretend, of course. He was obviously a well-spoken guy. He was obviously a well-educated guy, so he's not faking that. But this calmness and this very nice demeanor, like the calmness is probably very true, but the very nice open demeanor and how I'm such a friendly president, things like that. This would smash that completely, and it would show him as a very authoritarian figure. I'd be very interested to see in this. Now, again, I'm not American, so I don't exactly go in too deep with a lot of things that happen in America for this, so I would be very surprised to see this, although I'm sure there are plenty of people who follow American politics that could easily tell me that it's pretty obvious. But then again, we got to think, what happened under Obama? Under Obama, we saw the NSA gain extraordinary powers, and they spied not only on millions of American citizens, but millions of their allied citizens, not just here in Canada and in Mexico, but going across the globe. We're talking about them spying on European allies. There was a report about Merkel's phone getting hacked. I believe that happened when Edward Snowden did the leak. I believe that's when we found out that Angela Merkel's cell phone had been hacked by NSA agents when she was in the States. I think she was in for a meeting with Obama or something like that, or maybe in for the UN in New York. But her phone got hacked, and then when she found out about this, she was pissed. And they were just picking up a lot of metadata on phone calls. Now, metadata doesn't tell you much, A lot of people do freak out over it, but metadata really doesn't tell you much. I know, because I have, every time for my episodes, I have to fill out the metadata. It's just the basic information, such as when the call, in terms of this, it's like when the episode was made, what's the name, what's the, album if you want. So when we're talking about cell phone, it's just a number, it's usually the time they called, maybe the location, things like that. So it's not like they're actually listening in and hearing everything we were saying to each other. This is still a huge violation of privacy for every one of us to know that they're picking up our cell phone data. They're going after your internet history. They're hacking into your webcams and looking into your room. That's why so many people, including some of the top people in tech, have things like pieces of tape over their webcam. We should all take a page out of their book if they're willing to do that. And again, whether you liked or disliked former FBI Director James Comey, he was one of these people. In an interview, he said that if, when asked, do you keep a piece of tape over your webcam, he said, damn straight I do. When the FBI director says that, I think every single one of us should put a piece of tape over your webcam. In fact, I remember that when I ended up buying, when it came out, the Xbox One over the PS4, which kind of like and also kind of regret in certain ways. But I remember when that came out, that was also not long after the Edward Snowden leak and everything we found out about webcams being hacked, blah, blah, blah. I actually specifically got the Xbox One without the Kinect, because at first they were saying you have to have the Kinect with the webcam. And it was things like you could turn on your Xbox when you walk in the room. And then we hear this huge leak, so of course Xbox was going to make it optional, because a lot of people now don't want that webcam, and I was one of them. If they did not do that, I would not have purchased an Xbox One at that time. It just made a lot of people uncomfortable, rightfully so. And this all occurred under Obama. And there's a few other sketchy things happened under Obama. We also heard about what happened when during the raid to get Osama bin Laden, about how it was a joint operation between Pakistani and U.S. forces. Obama was supposed to wait a week before he came out to release that Osama bin Laden had been killed, and he was supposed to do a joint conference with the Pakistani prime minister or president, I'm not sure which one they have. And he went around them. He came out on his own, something like the day of the killing or the day after the killing, and said that we got him. That's if you believe that they actually killed Osama bin Laden, and still a lot of people don't believe it. I don't know. I don't know where else he would be now, or what he'd be doing right now if he wasn't dead, but I'm sure some people could probably point me to a video of somebody saying that Osama bin Laden's still alive. Maybe they'll show a picture from somewhere in the world of a guy who looks like him. So I guess what ended up happening under Obama with the NSA wasn't sort of like the Batman Dark Knight type of scenario, when, for those who remember, when Bruce Wayne could actually hear people through their cell phone. It wasn't quite that situation, but it was a mass surveillance that happened under Obama. So when we think that it was capable of doing a mass surveillance, and even though this is it's quite possible that this was going on before Obama, when Bush was in office, Obama definitely ramped up the program a lot under Obama. So there's no reason, with that knowledge, there's no reason to suspect that Obama at the same time wouldn't then turn this sort of equipment and surveillance equipment that he's already proven that he's willing to use against citizens. I see no reason that he wouldn't then try and use it in order to influence elections, let's say. And we only know so much from this memo. I mean, for all we know, with all the censorship that has happened on Twitter and Facebook and things like that, for all we know, maybe this memo talks about some partnership with them. I mean, Mark Zuckerberg's talked about how Facebook's going to be fighting fake news. This was some time ago, but are we supposed to really trust Facebook to fight fake news for us? And I suppose one last quick little story that makes me happy is that in Ontario there is a gas plant scandal that has gone on for a few years now, and there have been it's now been a criminal investigation into it. And for those who remember, it was just that there were supposed to be gas plants that were open up in Ontario, and they're supposed to bring in lots of lower costing energy as well as a bunch of jobs. And then that all got scrapped. It cost the province a lot of money. And essentially, people believe that there was negligence going on. They believe there was some backdoor dealings going on. And just recently, over the last couple of days, we found out that Dalton McGuinty, our old premier of Ontario before Kathleen Wynne took over, one of his top aides has been found guilty of destroying important information and files in relation to the gas plant scandal. So he was willingly trying to destroy the information. Boom. This is almost, that's funny actually, it's almost a Watergate style incident if you think about it, because Watergate, they broke into the Watergate office and they were trying to destroy records and trying to manipulate records. So this was something very similar to that. It's kind of funny. And actually, one thing that makes me even happier about this is the fact that this is probably going to go on to affect Wynne in the upcoming election that's going to happen. People should be happy about this. I remember I was speaking to my grandfather on the holidays because we were talking about the upcoming election. And one thing that I really hated he said that he was listening to some expert speak or something like that on the radio. Expert, they're, how expert are they really these days? But anyway, from what he was predicting that that Kathleen Wynne would win the next election with a minority government because she currently sits with a majority. This scared me. Even the possibility of having a minority government, I thought that was still concerning. Just Wynne in office was concerning. But now it looks like we're going to see, this is going to affect her numbers. In fact, her popularity is even worse than Donald Trump's. Now it seems that Donald Trump's record, his ratings right now are something around 35%, I believe they're still sitting around. But Kathleen Wynne is only looking at about 17% approval rating right now. And this can only affect it that much more. Although the media came to her defense because after this came out and there was a lot of criticism, people were saying that, well, what it really is everybody else is just being sexist because they're holding this female MP to a higher standard. Yeah, it was just a lot of misogyny getting thrown around. That was what was wrong with Kathleen Wynne. Not that she was so bad or anything, but just the fact that there was a lot of sexism of holding this female premier to a higher standard. No, it's because she's pushed a lot of bad policies. If she's sitting at something 17% approval ratings, that means a bunch of women also don't like her. A shit ton of Ontario women do not like Kathleen Wynne. So are they throwing around a bunch of misogyny and sexism as well? You know what? Kathleen Wynne is a lesbian, so homophobia on top of that? Is that what this is? Is homophobia as well? Oh, we're just hitting all the fucking marks today, aren't we? All the fucking marks. Kathleen Wynne is just terrible at her job, and it has nothing to do with sexism. It has nothing to do with homophobia. It has nothing to do with misogyny. It is the fact that she has led us down a bad path. However, it seems that the media in Ontario seem to be mostly on the Ontario Liberal side. Yeah, lovely. The Ontario Liberals, just like the federal Liberals, are not a Liberal party. They are not in any slightly remote of the way Liberals. They do not adhere to liberal philosophy. They adhere to a far left-wing progressive philosophy. They believe in shutting others down who don't agree with them. They believe that you are a terrible human being if you don't go along with what they believe. It gets a little ridiculous. So I'm really hoping that at the very least we can vote out the Liberal government in Ontario in June. So if you're watching this from Ontario, be sure to go to the polls come June 7th, I believe it is, and vote Kathleen Wynne out. Because Ontario's debt is terrible. This recent change to our minimum wage is actually causing less benefits to be offered by businesses, less movement available inside of corporations, because they don't want to pay you as much now. Well, because they're now that they're paying you $15 an hour, they're going to be less willing to take on new employees and move new employees around. In situations like this, they're always more willing to stretch out the work, whether that be management. And actually, a good example of this is my old work, Thermo Fisher, because when I first showed up there, we had a manager and 2 supervisors. And then we had a director who ran the whole show. At one point, our director got moved to a bigger location, so the manager took over as director. And when this happened, we hired on 2 new supervisors, so we had 4 supervisors in total. When I spoke to one of my current supervisors, the one who was already around from the beginning since I've been there, about why they were doing this, he admitted to me that it was because it cost less money. And what they ended up doing within the last few months before I quit there, one of the most ridiculous things was that after that, a couple of the supervisors were gone because, again, they felt that they had too big a management. All that happened is the 4 supervisors were butting heads with each other. Nothing got done. They needed just to downsize the management again. 2 supervisors get let go a couple years later. So what they end up doing is they run 2 supervisors, and then they create what they call team leads. 2 members, one from the morning shift, one from the night shift, who will essentially play the part of supervisor on shift while the supervisors aren't around, which after the team leads came in became a lot. They would play supervisor, but they didn't get any extra pay. So suddenly we went from 1 manager and 2 supervisor, which was an effective system, because if the night shift and the day shift supervisor butted heads and couldn't come to a decision, the manager would step in and act as that third party. We go to 4 supervisors who can't get anything done because we have 2 on days, 2 on nights. They can't agree, and they just argue all the time. And one thing gets decided one way, and then it gets decided another way by another supervisor. It was chaos. And it's also to save money. And then they save even more money by not essentially bringing on 2 supervisors that don't get paid. This is exactly what ends up happening in this sort of situation. And this is all that it's led to with the $15 minimum wage. So, I say again, Kathleen Wynne is terrible for Ontario. If any Ontarians are out there and are watching this, on June 7th, go to your fucking polls and vote her out. Even if you're somebody that says that voting is pointless, voting causes nothing, like it doesn't do anything, I don't care. Go to your polls and vote Kathleen Wynne out. And before I go today, I just wanted to say that I hope that you all will go and check out Professor Meta's work and go watch. He's got a couple videos available on YouTube. I'm hoping that he makes a few more available soon. I'm hoping that he will start putting more online and doing, I guess, more along the lines of what Dr. Peterson is doing. I did ask him this in the interview, but he seemed to be a little more reluctant to do this. Maybe he'll change his mind in the future. I hope he does, because I think he could be a very powerful voice in the fight for free speech, and I think he can bring, especially being a guy involved in the psychology department, I think he can, like Dr. Peterson, bring a very unique voice to the argument, to the debate. So I hope everyone checks him out. I hope you go follow him on Twitter. And yeah, I want to thank him again for joining me. And if anybody stuck around to the end, feel free to reach out to me and let me know if there's people you would like me to interview. because bear in mind I'm small time, so it's not like I could really reach out to real big people yet. So, but I'll do what I can. But if you have somebody in mind that you wouldn't mind me talking to, let me know. Twitter is the best way to do so. Let me know, and I will see if I can set something up. And also at the same time, if you have specific questions you'd like me to ask, you can also send those in. All right, but other than that, thank you for joining me on the podcast today. I'm Adrian Lloyd, and I'll see you all soon.